Welcome to Talking with Fred. This is Tony.
I'm Joel.
And we are, well, for most of you who, I know it's already like a few weeks
Middle
into
of
the
January,
new year. Yeah. So it's really exciting, 2024. And
A new year.
yeah. And so it's really exciting. And this is our attempt to go on YouTube with the video. So if you're watching from YouTube, welcome. And if you're just listening from any podcast streaming, greetings to you too, and hoping you guys will have a great 2024 so far. And I know a lot of people tend to, right before the new year, they start writing out their New Year's resolutions and wanting to start something new. And for me, it actually what comes to mind is Acts chapter 16 with Paul and Silas in the jail cell.
Okay.
After they were beaten
Right.
badly, and this is the interesting thing because you have them sitting in jail, handcuffed with all their bruises and cuts and bleeding like there's no tomorrow, and yet they start singing.
Mm-hmm.
And the key part of it that I found that was the most interesting is the Bible mentioning that it was midnight,
Mm-hmm.
and they started singing.
Well, I think it's interesting to approach it from that point of view because I think a lot of people do make New Year's resolutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they're broken by, the next week.
Yeah.
Not
to laugh at it, but it's just.
but that's the way it is.
It's
I mean,
true.
we all make New Year's resolutions, and we hold them for about a week or so, and then we forget them conveniently.
Yeah.
And then, we go on the way things are. And I think that a lot of people are, entering 2024 with a lot of questions, a lot of burdens, a lot of pain, a lot of things that they've been hanging on to. And maybe we should look at a New Year's as a new start to something else.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, to get some healing, get some restoration, get some resurrection power that can change some of those situations in our lives. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this idea that we have to bear these things forever.
It's a lie.
Is right. There is resurrection power, and God can, raise us up and create something new. And sometimes you just need that. And that's kind of where Paul and Silas are. I mean, they're doing what God called them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the backdrop. Paul we don't know because we weren't there, but it seems when you read the text that Paul kind of got a little irritated.
Mm-hmm.
It cost them. And I mean,
big time cost. I can't imagine. I mean, considering looking on from today's lenses, you have to treat people in a humane way.
Right.
But in their time, they didn't care if they died in the jail cell.
No.
I mean, it was filthy. You're chained up. You can't go to the bathroom in the corner or anything, so you're on yourself.
Right.
Not to get.
And I mean, there's
nasty, but
there's Silas that didn't have anything to do with it, right? I mean, and he's probably like, why couldn't you just be quiet? Why couldn't you just go on? Why
Sometimes
you have to open your big mouth, and so they're in this predicament that's hopeless at some level, right? I mean,
when you're in the dungeon at those times, you're kind of like, all right,
because you don't.
Is next.
Yeah, you don't know what's ahead of you, but it's not good, right?
Basically,
and so that's where they're at. They're in a really a tight spot, and I think a lot of people experience pain and burdens and things that we carry in that way,
mm-hmm.
right? Because in a sense, things that we carry with us,
mm-hmm.
right? Baggage that we carry with us has a tendency to beat us up.
Yeah,
it has a tendency to take its vengeance on us emotionally, psychologically, in our thoughts and in our actions.
Saying, "I've had a sleepless night."
Exactly.
And you let your mind
because it just
completely run.
continues to torture you.
Yeah.
You know, it just continues to torture you. And yeah, a lot of people can't sleep at night, and because there's no peace.
Yeah.
You know, and that's one of the biggest message of the coming of Christ was that we would have peace. I mean, that's what the angels proclaimed the night of his birth, right? There'll be peace on earth, peace to men, peace to all people, peace to those that choose God. And, you know, then we find ourselves struggling with these things that we just continue to carry around year after year after year.
Yeah.
And they don't go away. Time does not heal all wounds.
No. I mean, there are times I find myself when I'm walking to the store and I'm thinking about something that happened long ago.
Right.
And it's a natural human thing to try to reconcile that or atone that in a different way than what.
But I do
happened.
and I do think there's an important part or point that you bring up, because as we walk with Christ, it's a process, right? Paul writes in Romans 8, 21, 23, something about we're longing for the final renewal of our bodies, the final healing of our existence, right? And so that kind of points to the fact that life is a process. Life is a journey, right? And so sometimes we go through these things or these times in life where something we've been dealing with, we finally get to a point where we obtain some healing, right? We can really forgive. We can let it go. We can let it fall by the wayside. It doesn't affect us anymore. But then what happens? Exactly what you're talking about. You'll be walking along and suddenly something pops in your mind. Yeah. And it's easy to get a defeated point of view. It's easy to look at it and say, I'm never going to get past this. So why even try? Instead of looking at it from the point of view of what God looks at it. And that is, he couldn't have brought that up in you to heal it until he had healed the other. So when you got healing for what you had been dealing with, that then made you ready to take the next step. And so we should have a thankful attitude, right? That, okay, now this has come up, and it couldn't come up because it was laying under the pain of so many other things, and God has taken that kind of like layer for layer, right? Yeah. And then when something new comes up, and I know it sounds strange, but in a way we should be rejoicing. We should be thankful that these thoughts suddenly come up to us, episodes that we had in our youth or in our teenage years, or bad relationships, bad jobs, bad family, whatever. But not look at it from a defeatist point of view. Look at it from a positive point of view that hey, God, here's a new opportunity, and you've brought me to this place in my journey. Now I am equipped. I am mature enough. I am developed enough in my walk and faith in you that you can deal with this. And I look forward to that when we've dealt with this, then the next will come up.
So what you're saying is basically, if he slaps you in the face, turn the other cheek,
right? Because that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And it's looking at it from a victorious point of view. Jesus, you have won the victory on the cross. Your blood has healed me. Your sacrifice has freed me. I am atoned with the Father. I am walking with you, following you. Yeah. And it's a process, and things are going to come up.
And it's not an easy easy walk.
No, it's not. But for every challenge, there's an answer.
Yeah.
And the answer is so incredible that we should have an appetite for more. But the only way we can get more is if we have more healing.
So you're saying be a glutton for punishment?
In a sense, because the world we live in wants to avoid it.
Yeah.
The world we live in wants everything to project as being in control, being beautiful, being successful, being everything, right?
Well, it's just like the social media thing with filters. We got to filter out all the bad things, filter out the wrinkles, and plastic surgery syndrome type
these
of
people
thing.
These influencers that make TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and whatever, they go out and rent beautiful homes
Yeah.
And they rent cars and they make these clips and they project themselves a lot of times in a way that, everything's going okay. But that's just not life. Life is good times, but there are also bad times.
I really appreciate those influencers that really show both sides.
Yeah.
We're having a good day here,
right?
But then
we're having a bad day
this
here,
is a
because
bad
that's
day.
life, right?
Yeah.
And it's not always good. It's not always. But on the other hand, it can be. We can find peace. Just because you're being challenged, Tony, just because a thought comes up in you, just because a bad experience is weighing on you, doesn't mean that you lose your peace.
No.
I can still have peace knowing that I'm in a battle, but that the victory is won. I can
Which
know
actually
that,
answers my question I was going to ask you.
Okay.
Can you have peace in a stressful situation?
Yeah, why not?
I mean, we
because
always
you know
have
the
that-
outcome.
Yeah.
Right.
We have that situation where the worst of the worst can happen, where you're in a pit, you're fighting a lion. On top of everything, with
It's
most
snowing.
people, what they're dealing with today is it's snowing.
Right. And so it's as if things can just kind of just multiply in these situations. Right?
Yeah.
But when you know, hey, first of all, there's a way through it. Right. And not only is there a way through it, or if there is a way through it, then that must mean I can get to the other side.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's logic.
Yeah.
So if I follow Jesus and he leads me, he's going to lead me through these places.
Yeah.
He's going to ultimately lead me to green pastures, but we've got to go through the valley, right?
Well, he showed it
And
those three times he was tempted by
Right.
the devil.
And so we follow him knowing that, hey, it's rocky right now, but we're going to get to the other side of this, right? And then we're going to have green pastures. And then he's going to tell us there's another valley to go through, right? Right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to stop at the green pastures that I'm at now. My ultimate goal is heaven, right? So I don't want to stop at the green pastures now. I want to stop because I need to be refreshed and rest, but I want to continue, right? And I think that's what's pretty incredible.
Well, like we've
this.
always said, if you stop, you're basically dead.
Yeah. And so, yeah, exactly. And so, you get back to Paul and Silas sitting there, and I mean, obviously they're just like everybody else. They're frustrated, they're sad, they're worried, they're all of these things,
Hurting.
right?
Yeah.
And then, they begin to sing hymns, they begin to praise. And I think that that's the most important sign of someone who knows that God is with them. They don't know what the outcome of this is going to be, right? I mean, Luke writes it as a major miracle, major wonder of God. They didn't know that, right?
No, when you're stuck in that situation,
Right.
you're just kind of in that situation.
Yeah, they kind of expected maybe that this was the end of the road. And so they start singing, they start praying, they start praising. And I think that's really important because we have to understand that everything starts there, right? I mean, the lifting up of Christ in our life, the praising of Christ, and I don't mean music. I mean authentic praise and worship that comes from our inside. It can be in song, it can be in dance, it can be in words, it can be so many different things that you get to a point where you're lifting yourself. Because that's the way to come into the presence of God.
Basically like Psalms 150.
Yeah.
You have different ways of praising God. There's the vocal and everything. Yeah.
And the funny thing is, these things, they hang together all through the Bible because this basically goes back all the way back to Israel coming out of Egypt. And when they come out of Egypt and they have to survive, right? How do we live, right? And in Numbers, the 2nd chapter, God comes to Moses and he says, this is the way I want you to encamp, right? This is the way I want you to build the village, build the community. And these things that God gives him, we can use in our lives, in our families, in our societies and everything, right? And God plans it all out. And unfortunately, it's one of those passages where everybody just kind of skips, right? It's those passages that are just long,
Yeah, I remember that.
Judah had 74,000, and Issachar he had 58,000. So people just say next chapter, right? But unfortunately, because when you really begin to look at it and dig into it, God gives you a plan, and in that plan, right, He tells Moses, "I want Judah to encamp on the east side of the encampment." Right, the tabernacle where God lived, right, was in the middle. Right? And that has never changed. Some people will want to tell you, well, we don't need a tabernacle anymore because God doesn't live in the tabernacle. That's true. But the picture has never changed because now the tabernacle is in our heart. Right? So it's the same pattern that God does. God is the same yesterday and today and forever. Right?
And just so you know, if you're looking this at YouTube, just kind of picture it this way. Your heart is kind of like the center here. You got your head, your heart, and your legs to stand on. Best visual I can think of.
Right.
And where's God? In the center.
He's in the center of everything. Yeah. And that's why I always talk about, I don't like prioritizing things. I like to look
Put God first. And everything will follow.
I like to look at it from more of the point of view that no, God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit is the center of my life, of which everything is built around. And that's what God tells Moses. And he says, Moses, on the east side, I want Judah to encamp. And Judah, his name literally means to praise. But it was important that he was on the east side because the east side is the side that we have to re-enter the kingdom. Right? Do you remember Adam and Eve, right? And so you know their story, right? And they get thrown out of the Garden of Eden, right? Where did God put the flaming swords?
On the east side.
He's put it on the east side. So that means that that's the only way back in, right? And they were there to protect it, right? So Judah means praise. So that is the way we re-enter. When you enter the temple, you entered it from the east. When Jesus enters Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, he enters it from the east because we have to re-enter the kingdom of God through the eastern gate. That was the gate we were thrown out of. And so how do we re-enter? We re-enter with praising him, with humbling ourselves, because that's what Adam and Eve didn't do. The serpent said, you can be just like him. And they said, yes, we can. Right? So it was the pride that threw us out. So we have to check our pride at the door. We have to humble ourselves and lift him up. That's all praise is, right? Praise is worshiping. And to worship simply means that I bow before you and I lift you up. Right? So that's what we have to do. We have to lift him up. And that enters into the courts of praise, into the temple, into where the God is, the Holy of Holies, right? So that's what Paul's doing. Paul's not trying to avoid anything. He's not trying to deflect negative feelings. Him and Silas are not trying to just make have a good time in a bad situation. They're practicing something that God laid down for us from the very beginning. This is what he wanted Adam and Eve to do. We were created to worship him. We were created to serve him. And that's what they start doing. They begin to praise and worship because that enters us into the presence of the Most High.
Well, it also shows that it's just part of their life. That's this, like he talked about prayer.
Right.
This is just something that I do.
And
it's a natural instinct.
Yeah.
In the situation,
and you have to practice it. I mean, so many people don't practice it, right? So many people don't do it, but it's fundamental of understanding how we interact with God, because everybody wants to ask, how do I hear God, right? Yeah, but what do you do to hear God? Right? I mean, what are you doing to hear God? If you want to
hear him right now, and I need to hear from God.
But if you're not spending time with him, you're not going to know him, right?
And what's fun about this is that, there's time you can set aside, whether you wake up early or you're at night, whatever you do. But there's also, like Paul said, I never cease to pray. It means it doesn't matter what you do. If you're going to the store, you have an opportunity there.
Right.
But
if you don't spend time with each other, you can call me from anywhere in the world, and as soon as you say, "Hi, Joel," I know who it is, right? Because I know you. Mm-hmm. Somebody else calls me I've never heard. I have no idea who it is, right?
That's true.
And so, but that's because we know each other.
Mm-hmm.
We spend time with each other, right? And so that's why we have to pray. That's why we have to worship. That's why we have to enter his courts with thanksgiving. And it's such an important element that people don't realize, right? So people will wake up in the middle of the night and they will be worried about whatever is going on, and they will lay there and continue to worry instead of beginning to pray, instead of beginning to speak in tongues. I listened to a lecture yesterday by a neurosurgeon that was talking about the effects of speaking in tongues to the brain. And there's apparently quite a lot of research that's being done and has been done about verbal expression without words. In other words, speaking something that you don't know what would be a babbling, right? Which would be a speaking in other tongues experience. That it actually activates parts of your brain that usually aren't activated. And it means it makes the brain much more receptive and much more equipped to release what needs to be released so that we can be.
It's fascinating.
We can find, solutions and whatever. And so I tell people all the time, and I've told people for years, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're under attack, you can't do anything with the thoughts, then begin to pray. Begin to speak in tongues. Begin to worship. Begin to sing in tongues, because then my consciousness can't deal with it. I can't sing in another tongue and then think thoughts, right? You can't do that,
focused on
right?
one thing, yeah.
So you gravitate toward the lifting up and the singing of hymns. And when you do that, then the presence of God comes, and something great's going to happen.
It's interesting because those nights when I really have those moments, we all have them.
Right.
And I stop and I just start praying. I tend to just doze right back off.
Of course you do.
I'm just so
because
relaxed.
it's peace, right?
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen the first time. I spoke with a woman a few years back that she went home and tried it, and then she came back and she said it didn't work. No, but I mean,
First
how long
time.
did you do it? I did it maybe 30 seconds. Well, you've got to practice it, right? We're getting back to this. If you don't do something, then it's not going to be there when you need it, right? I mean, that's just logic. So it needs to be a part of your prayer life. It needs to be a part of your everyday life. That what is called that prayer closet. Go into your prayer closet and shut the door. Give yourself time to pray. And you can do that anywhere. You can do that while you're at work. If you're doing a task that you've got muscle memory for, that you can just do without thinking about it, you can at the same time be praying. You can same time be.
Well, it's just like the idea with Noah when he got off the ark. He just set an altar out, which to me represents that I can have an altar anywhere I need it to be.
And so you begin to build this up, that you're basically only a very short distance to prayer always.
Well, the other part of it too is showing this is a nice step of when you're having those New Year's resolutions and you're starting to feel yourself, that grip fall. It's, okay, I've started this. Sometimes the first day is the hardest. It's hard. The second day, a little even harder.
Right.
The third day, it's still hard, but you're starting to get used to it.
You'll eventually get easier.
By the seventh day, you're kind of in that routine of not doing it.
And it will eventually.
Or doing what you're doing.
And that's just a part of it, right? They didn't get the idea in the moment to start doing this, right? This is something they always did. This is something that was natural for them, but it was something grounded in an understanding of how God works, right? It's not how we work. It's what are the patterns of God? God's not that difficult to figure out if you read your Bible. But the problem is not a lot of people read their Bible. And I mean, reading those long
Numbers.
Leviticus and Numbers. Those are the two books everybody jumps over, and that's a shame because you learn what God wants. You learn what God is asking us to do. Mm-hmm. Right? You learn what we're supposed to do, how to approach Him. We live in Denmark, and we have a king. And
long live the king.
If you want to have an audience with the king, of which you can here, everyone has the right to meet the king if they want to, and they can send in an application, and a time will be arranged, and you can meet the king. Well, but you don't just come.
I might try that.
You don't just come waltzing in.
Yeah, no.
You have to go through a preparation because you're entering the king, right? Mm-hmm. So no, it's not just, hey, how you're doing, right? Everything is prepared. And so it's the same way with God. If you're not going to learn how He works, if you're not going to learn how God expects us to act, then you're never going to enter His presence. Mm-mm. Because you're always going to be expecting Him to enter your presence. Mm-hmm. And that's just not how it works.
God, I've got the magic lamp I'm going to need. I'm going to need this today.
And unfortunately, that's the way we look at it, yeah. Right? A lot of people look at it that way.
Got my Santa Claus list.
It wasn't Paul. It wasn't Paul and Silas that God was entering their presence. They were entering His presence in a very bad situation.
And it shows moments after.
Right. Yeah.
It really does show.
Because as you're in, and as you mentioned, it's at midnight, right? It's in the middle of the night, which is a time where pain is. I mean, we all have.
But we're all in our mind where we're supposed to be at peace because now we're technically resting.
Right. Well, that's God's intention. Yeah. That's the way God created us. Yeah. God created us to sleep at night, to be rested at night, right? But then we experience all these other things that disturbs that makes us exhausted and stressed and all of these things, right?
After a few days of that, my eye starts to twitch.
And so, the way it works is the fact that the night, if you go back to the Old Testament and look at it, of what the terms mean and how that it was experienced, that the middle of the night is the time where the universe is opened up. Mm. And I don't know if anyone has experienced it. I have a few times in my life. If you can get to a place in this world where there is absolutely no light pollution, no disturbance.
Yeah, I've been there.
And it's a clear night.
It's gorgeous.
The universe opens up.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Bahamas, and you could go to we did a lot. We would go to the beach at night. Mm-hmm. And you could lay on the beach by the ocean, and they didn't have big waves on the islands that I was on. And so you got that rhythmic, just those small waves, that rhythmic, and,
it's calming.
You begin to, if you're laying close to it and you're listening to it, then you kind of get into that. You kind of ride the waves in your emotions, right? I mean, you feel like you're on the ocean, right? And then suddenly the universe is clear and you can see all the stars. And after a while, it's crazy, but after a while, you feel like you're just running through the universe, right?
It's amazing to look at.
You're just one with it. And
I was on the opposite coast, and I was higher up in altitude. Yeah. But same
thing.
You just see, it was astonishing.
I've done the same thing in Africa.
Yeah.
It's amazing, a wonderful experience. But the point about it is that's the way God created things. So Paul and Silas knew that if we begin to enter into His presence, and we do that through praise and worship, we do that through singing of hymns, the universe opens. Then God reveals Himself, right? And when God reveals Himself, something incredible happens. The heavens and the earth shake.
Yeah. Just like in this case, the prison shook.
Yeah.
And the doors opened.
The things
that fell off.
The things that were holding them imprisoned fell. And I think that's one of the things we should think about going into 2024.
Well, the other part of it too, that when I mentioned midnight, was that a lot of people fail to remember that when the clock strikes 12, it's a new day.
Yeah, for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a brand new day.
Yeah. And when we look at it from that point of view, that God will reveal himself to us if we enter into his presence. Mm-hmm. And the best time to enter into his presence, well, it's any time. But I mean, what I'm trying to express is that when we're in pain, when we're in frustration, stressed, that is a wonderful time to enter his presence, because he's going to reveal himself. And the things that are holding you imprisoned are going to be released. Mm-hmm. So the chains are going to fall. The prison is going to be shaken. The doors are going to be open. Yeah. And you can leave. Now, that's your own choice. You can be, they could have sat there. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's up to them. But God did everything that God does, right? Yeah. He set them free. He released them. It's up to you now to do with something with it. Open the door. Now you've got to walk out. Mm-hmm. And that's part of going to the green pastures, right? That's part of saying, okay, I'm going to leave this behind. The door's open. I'm free. The chains are fallen. Now I'm walking out of this prison, and I'm going to go to the place of peace. God has revealed himself. And the interesting thing is... And now I'm going to wait on God for the next... Right. And God's intention for us was to have his revelation as a part of our rest. That was his plan, right? Because we're supposed to sleep at night. Mm-hmm. We're supposed to have rest at night. But many, many times, I get an answer to the things that I'm facing while I'm asleep, right? Dreams come. And there's been many of an occasions where I have prepared for Sunday morning, for example, and wake up Sunday morning after having slept through Saturday night, knowing that something else is on God's heart, and have to get up and prepare for that, because in that middle of the night, God has revealed himself, right? Mm-hmm. When I'm unconscious of myself, you're not in your own way. Exactly. Then he comes and he talks to my spirit, and he talks to my mind, and he renews me and he refreshes me. And that's the way it was meant to be. That's funny. You remind me of that. Your dad, he got on my case one time about how I was driving stick shift, and it really bothered me. Mm-hmm. But then that night, I had a dream sitting in my father's truck, and God was driving. And it was just, I woke up the next morning at peace, knowing that I can do this. Right. God showed me, it's all good, drive. Right. And I drove. Right. And your father never made a comment about it. Right, and that's the point. That, you can get those answers, and you get a lot of answers when you sleep, because that's the way God created us. And so that's one of the reasons. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be any mystery to us as to why the devil wants to disrupt that, because he wants to disrupt the communion with your Father. Mm-hmm. And so he does everything he can, and he tries to wake you up, and he tries to make you worried. And so, hey, we can enter his presence, and that's what we're supposed to do. Yeah. And it really is calming of the mind and of the spirit to know that, anywhere I'm at, the stressful situation that I'm facing, God, you've got my back. Yeah, exactly. And I don't have to worry about it. And you're going to get me through whatever. Yeah. And that's why I love this podcast, why we call it Talking with Fred. Right. Because that's what we do. Yeah. We want to encourage the peace that God gives us. We know there's peace, and I want to live in that peace, and I want to talk with it. I want to be with it. I want to be encompassed by it. It's the way I want to live my life. Yep. Just like Scrooge McDuck would dive into his thing of gold coins, just swim right through. I mean, you can live your life any way you want to. I'm going to live my life with peace. With peace. Yeah. And that's an amazing thing. So we want to encourage you, and those of you watching out there and listening out there, that seek God's peace. Let him be the center of your life, and watch him network out, and watch how his peace just flows out like a ripple effect. It really is an amazing thing. So check us out on YouTube if you haven't. Go on the podcast. You can find us Talking with Fred. You can always write us at talkingwithfred 777 at gmail.com. You can find us on YouTube, on Facebook, and you can always write us there. We'd like to hear your comments
especially from the video. And any questions you have, too, we can answer it on the next one. And always trying to post little fun videos and stuff on TikTok at talkingwithfred777. So we hope to hear from y'all. Have a good one.